Susan stood frozen at the kitchen sink, her coffee mug trembling in her hand. Through the window, she could see it, Emily's bicycle, still leaning against the garage door. The same spot it had been since yesterday. Her daughter had promised to be home by curfew. That bike should have been ridden back, put away, forgotten about. But there it stood. Untouched. Haunting. And in that single moment, Susan knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. Emily was missing. And nobody had any answers. Before we dive into one of the most twisted missing persons cases Michigan has ever seen, I need to know, are you Team Never Give Up or Team Cold Case Files? Drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from and which team you're on. Because trust me, by the end of this story, you're going to need to pick a side. And here's the thing, we're on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you watching right now could be the one that gets us there. So if your team never give up, prove it. Hit that subscribe button like Emily's family never gave up hope. Let's build something here. To understand the absolute terror of that moment, the moment a mother realizes her child isn't coming home, we need to rewind to a seemingly ordinary summer evening in the year 2000. The night Emily Carter walked out her front door and vanished into thin air, leaving behind a mystery that would haunt an entire town for 23 years. Kalamazoo, Michigan. Summer, 2000. Picture this, it's one of those perfect Midwest evenings. You know the kind, where the heat of the day finally breaks, the air smells like fresh-cut grass and barbecue, and the sky turns into this impossible painting of orange and pink. Kids are out riding bikes. Neighbors are chatting on porches. Everything feels safe. Normal. The kind of night where nothing bad is supposed to happen. 16-year-old Emily Carter pushed open her front door, her auburn hair catching the last rays of sunlight. She had that classic teenage confidence, you know, that feeling of invincibility that comes with being young and thinking you've got the whole world figured out. "I'll be back before curfew, Mom." "I promise," she called over her shoulder, her voice bright with excitement. Susan Carter appeared in the doorway, dish towel in hand, giving her daughter that look every parent gives, half trust, half worry. "You better be, Em. And call me when you get there, okay?" "Mom, it's just the diner." "I'll be fine." Emily laughed, grabbing her bike from where it leaned against the garage. She threw one last wave, that million-dollar smile lighting up her face, and pedaled down the driveway into the warm summer evening. She was heading to meet her boyfriend, Jake, at the local diner. Nothing unusual. Nothing suspicious. Just a typical teenage date that Emily had done dozens of times before. That image, Emily waving goodbye, her hair flowing behind her as she rode into the sunset, would be burned into Susan's memory forever. Because it was the last time she would see her daughter for 23 years. The next morning started like any other. The sun streamed through the kitchen windows. The coffee maker gurgled. Susan was going through her usual routine, her mind already running through the day's tasks, when she glanced out the window toward the driveway. And her world stopped. Emily's bicycle. Still there. Exactly where it had been the night before, leaning against the garage door. The dish she'd been washing slipped from her hands, clattering in the sink. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. No. No, no, no. This wasn't right. Emily was never late. Ever. She was the responsible one, the girl who actually followed curfew, who always kept her promises. With shaking hands, Susan grabbed the phone and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional, routine. My daughter, Susan's voice cracked. My daughter didn't come home last night. She went to meet her boyfriend at the diner, but her bike is still here. She's only 16. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong. I need you to stay calm. We're sending officers to your location right now. But Susan couldn't stay calm. Because a mother knows. Deep in her bones, she already knew this wasn't a case of Emily sleeping over at a friend's house. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was something else. Something darker. By noon, Kalamazoo police had descended on the neighborhood. Cruisers lined the street. Officers fanned out, knocking on doors, their faces serious and focused. Neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering, pointing, looking worried. Have you seen Emily Carter? 16 years old, auburn hair, last seen around 7 p.m. yesterday evening. Door after door. House after house. The same questions. The same answer. No. Nobody had seen her. The diner where Emily was supposed to meet Jake? The staff remembered Jake sitting alone in a booth for over an hour, checking his watch, looking increasingly worried before finally leaving. Emily never showed up. The police searched everything. The woods behind the neighborhood. The parks. The abandoned buildings downtown. The lake. They brought in search dogs that picked up Emily's scent from her bedroom but lost it just 2 blocks from her house, as if she'd simply evaporated. No witnesses. No evidence of a struggle. No abandoned bike found somewhere else. No frantic phone call. No ransom demand. No body. Just nothing. Hours bled into days. Days stretched into agonizing weeks. The local news ran Emily's photo every evening. Flyers with her bright smile appeared on every telephone pole, in every shop window, on every community bulletin board. Have you seen this girl? But as summer turned to fall, and fall faded into winter, the news coverage slowed. The search parties grew smaller. The leads dried up. And Emily Carter's case went from active investigation to cold case file. The truth is, in America, someone goes missing every 90 seconds. And in a small town like Kalamazoo, resources are limited. New cases demand attention. The urgent pushes out the unsolved. But Susan? Susan never moved on. Time is a cruel thing when you're waiting for someone who never comes home. Weeks became months. Months became years. The calendar pages kept turning, but inside Susan's house, time had stopped on that summer evening in 2000. Kalamazoo moved forward. Life continued. People forgot. But how could Susan forget? How could she move on when Emily's bedroom remained exactly as she'd left it, the bed made, textbook stacked on the desk, a half-written note to a friend still sitting by the phone? The first anniversary of Emily's disappearance was the hardest. Then the second. Then Susan stopped counting because the numbers became too painful. The police had done what they could, but let's be real, in a small town department with limited resources, cold cases get buried. New crimes demand attention. Fresh investigations take priority. And Emily's file got moved to a box, then to a storage room, then basically forgotten. But not by Susan. She became a fixture at support groups for families of missing persons. She knew every other parent in that room, could recite their stories by heart. They were bonded by the worst kind of hope, the hope that keeps you breathing but also keeps you trapped in an endless loop of what if. At night, Susan would sit by the living room window, staring out at that driveway, at that spot where Emily's bike had stood. Waiting. Always waiting. For headlights. For a phone call. for a knock at the door, for anything that would bring her baby home. The house that had once been filled with laughter and teenage music and the chaos of family life grew quiet. Eerily quiet. The kind of quiet that presses down on you, that makes you hear your own heartbeat, that becomes its own kind of torture. Years passed. 5, 10, 15. People stopped asking Susan about Emily. They'd give her those pitying looks in the grocery store, the ones that said, "Poor woman, she still hasn't accepted it." Neighbors stopped bringing it up. Even well-meaning friends suggested it might be time to let go, to find closure, to move forward. But how do you let go of your own child? Hold up, I need you to do something right now. If you think Susan was right to never give up, hit that like button. But if you're sitting there thinking this is heartbreaking but maybe it's time to accept reality, leave it alone. Because this next part is about to change everything, and I need to know where you stand. Also, we're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and honestly, every single one of you watching without subscribing is basically choosing the side of giving up. Don't be that person. Choose hope. Choose the truth. Subscribe now. Let's get there together. Then, in 2017, 17 years after Emily vanished, everything changed. Susan was going through her daily mail, expecting the usual bills and junk advertisements, when she noticed an envelope with no return address. The postmark was from a town she'd never heard of, somewhere in rural Michigan. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single typed letter. Clean. Impersonal. Deliberately anonymous. The words made her heart stop. I know what happened to Emily Carter. I've been carrying this secret for too many years, and I can't do it anymore. I can tell you everything, but only if you promise my identity stays protected. What happened to your daughter is worse than you can imagine, and the person responsible is still out there. Still free. If you want the truth, contact Detective Karen Whitman. But be prepared, the truth will destroy you. Susan read it 3 times, her vision blurring with tears. Her hand shook so badly she could barely hold the paper. This was it. After 17 years of silence, someone knew something. She immediately called the police department and asked for Detective Karen Whitman, the detective who'd taken over Emily's cold case years earlier. Whitman had a reputation for being relentless, for never quite letting go of unsolved cases even when everyone else had moved on. When Detective Whitman saw the letter, her cop instincts immediately kicked in. She'd seen false leads before, plenty of them. Attention seekers. Conspiracy theorists. People who genuinely believed they had information but were just confused. In cold cases, especially ones as old as Emily's, you learn to be skeptical. But something about this letter felt different. The language was specific. It referenced details that hadn't been made public. And the tone, it wasn't sensational or dramatic. It was guilty. Afraid. The tone of someone who'd been carrying a heavy secret and was finally ready to unload it. Whitman assembled a small team and started tracing the letter's origin. It took days of careful investigation, working with postal services, checking surveillance footage from the town where it was mailed, cross-referencing databases. Finally, they got a name, Rachel Torres. She'd lived in Kalamazoo back in 2000 but had moved away shortly after Emily's disappearance. According to records, Rachel had no criminal history. No obvious connection to the Carter family. No reason to know anything about the case. So why had she written that letter? Rachel refused to meet in person. She was terrified, paranoid even. But she agreed to communicate through written correspondence and eventually, encrypted emails. What she revealed made Whitman's blood run cold. According to Rachel, Emily had been abducted by a man named Craig Thompson, a local with a history of violence, manipulation, and predatory behavior. Thompson had been on police radar for years but had always managed to avoid serious charges. He was smart, careful, the kind of criminal who knew exactly how to stay just beyond the reach of the law. Rachel claimed that Thompson had kidnapped Emily that night in 2000, that he'd been watching her for weeks, learning her patterns, waiting for the perfect opportunity. But here's where it got darker. Rachel suggested that Emily might still be alive. After all these years. Still alive. But hidden. Controlled. Living under a different identity. Thompson's name had appeared in the original investigation, but only peripherally. He'd been questioned and released. There'd never been enough evidence to connect him to Emily's disappearance. Now, Whitman's team dove deep into Thompson's background, and what they found was disturbing. A pattern of manipulation. Allegations from multiple women about controlling behavior. Suspicious moves from town to town. A life lived in shadows. But still no solid evidence. No smoking gun. Nothing that could tell them where Emily was, if she was even still alive. The investigation dragged on through 2017, 2018, 2019. More letters from Rachel. More breadcrumbs. More hints at a dark truth, but never quite enough to break the case wide open. Then, in early 2023, Rachel finally gave them something concrete, an address. A secluded compound in northern Michigan. Deep in the woods. Far from civilization. A place where someone could keep a person hidden from the world for decades. For the first time in 23 years, Detective Karen Whitman felt something she'd almost forgotten: genuine hope. The compound Rachel had mentioned was located nearly 200 miles north of Kalamazoo, buried in dense forest near the Upper Peninsula. The kind of place that doesn't show up on GPS, where the nearest neighbor is miles away, where someone could scream and no one would ever hear them. Whitman put together a tactical team. They couldn't afford to mess this up. If Emily really was there, if she'd been held captive for over 2 decades, they needed to approach this perfectly. One wrong move could trigger a hostage situation or worse. They spent weeks surveilling the property. Drones captured aerial footage. Undercover officers posed as hikers in the area. They needed to know what they were walking into. What they saw was chilling: a main cabin, several outbuildings, high fences, security cameras. This wasn't just some off-grid homestead. This was a fortress. Someone was definitely hiding something. The raid happened on a cold morning in March 2023. Multiple vehicles. Armed officers. Search warrants. The whole operation moved with military precision. When they breached the compound, they found it recently abandoned, but clearly lived in. Food still in the refrigerator. Clothes in the closets. A fire that had been burning in the stove just hours before. Someone had been tipped off. Someone had run. But they'd left things behind. Important things. In one of the back bedrooms, investigators found women's clothing from different eras. Styles from the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s. Different sizes. As if someone had aged while living there, their wardrobe adapting over decades. Then they found the photographs. Dozens of them. Scattered across a desk. Hidden in drawers. Tucked between mattresses. And there, in one photo, was a face Detective Whitman had been staring at for years. Older now, much older, but unmistakable. Emily Carter. She was standing outside this very cabin, holding a young child in her arms. The photo looked recent, maybe a year or 2 old. Whitman's hands trembled as she held the picture. Emily was alive. Or at least, she had been recently. But where was she now? And who was the child? The forensic team combed through everything. They found journals written in what appeared to be Emily's handwriting, but the entries were bizarre, stilted, careful, like someone writing under surveillance. They found medical supplies, children's toys, books on homeschooling. The picture that emerged was horrifying. Emily had been held here, possibly for years. And at some point, she'd had a child. Or was caring for one. But the biggest question remained, where had they gone? Whitman's team expanded the search radius, checking nearby towns, gas stations, motels. They distributed Emily's age-progressed photos to every law enforcement agency in the region. Then, a break came from the most unexpected place, a small-town hospital in Wisconsin, just across the state line. A nurse called in a tip. A woman matching Emily's description had brought a young boy in for treatment about 2 weeks earlier. The nurse remembered because the woman had seemed nervous, paranoid even, and had paid cash. She'd given a name, but the nurse was almost certain it was fake. The name she'd used? Sarah Green. Whitman felt her pulse quicken. They were close. So close. They traced Sarah Green to a modest house on the outskirts of a town called Riverside. When they arrived, they found the same thing as before, recently abandoned, but clearly lived in. Emily was running. But why? Was she running from Thompson? Or from something else? The investigation turned into a chase. For weeks, they followed breadcrumbs across the Midwest. A sighting here. A cash transaction there. Emily, or Sarah, was staying off the grid, moving constantly, always one step ahead. It was exhausting. Frustrating. Every time they got close, she disappeared again. Then came the question that haunted Whitman, was Emily running from her captors? Or was she running from being rescued? After 23 years of captivity, of psychological manipulation, of living in fear, did Emily even want to be found? Had she been so thoroughly controlled, so completely broken, that she saw her rescuers as the enemy? It was a heartbreaking possibility, but one they had to consider. The pattern continued for months. Sightings of Sarah Green and the young boy in different states. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa. She was moving constantly, never staying anywhere longer than a week or two. But then, in late summer of 2023, the trail went completely cold. No sightings. No transactions. No leads. It was as if Emily had learned they were tracking her and had gone completely underground. Whitman refused to give up. She spent hours reviewing every piece of evidence, every photograph, every journal entry from the cabin, looking for something they might have missed. Some clue about where Emily might go, who she might contact, what her next move might be. That's when she noticed something in one of the journal entries, a reference to a place called the Safe Cabin. Emily had written about it several times, always cryptically, but with what seemed like affection. A place that had meant something to her before everything happened. Whitman dug into Emily's past, interviewing old friends, family members, anyone who might know about a cabin. And then Susan remembered, Emily's grandfather had owned a small hunting cabin in northern Wisconsin. Emily had loved going there as a child. It had been sold after his death in 1998, but maybe it was a long shot. But it was all they had. The cabin was even more remote than Thompson's compound. 3 hours north of anywhere, down a barely maintained dirt road, surrounded by dense pine forest. Whitman approached alone this time. No tactical team. No show of force. Just her, in a regular car, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. As she pulled up to the cabin, she saw smoke rising from the chimney. Someone was there. Her heart pounded as she got out of the car. This was it. After 23 years, she was about to come face to face with Emily Carter. She knocked on the door. Silence. She knocked again. Emily? My name is Detective Karen Whitman. I'm here to help you. Your mother Susan has been looking for you for 23 years. She never stopped. She never gave up hope. More silence. Then, slowly, the door opened. And there she stood. Emily Carter. 39 years old now, her auburn hair streaked with grey, her face lined with years of hardship and fear. But her eyes, those same eyes from the missing person posters, were unmistakable. Please, Emily whispered, her voice shaking. Please don't make me go back. The silence in the gas station was deafening. Emily stood there, tears streaming down her face, her whole body trembling. This wasn't the joyful reunion anyone had imagined. This was raw. Broken. Real. Please, Emily whispered again, her voice cracking. You don't understand what you've done by finding me. Whitman's heart sank. Emily, we're here to help you. Your mother, my mother doesn't know the truth. Emily's voice rose, panic flooding her eyes. Nobody knows the truth. And if I tell you, if I tell anyone, people will die. That's when Whitman noticed Emily's hand shaking uncontrollably. This wasn't just fear. This was terror. 23 years of terror compressed into this single moment. Then help me understand, Whitman said softly, moving closer. Help me protect you. But I can't do that if you don't tell me what's really going on. Emily's eyes darted to the window, scanning the parking lot like someone expecting an ambush. Finally, she looked back at Whitman, and what she said next changed everything. It wasn't just Craig Thompson. Emily's voice dropped to barely a whisper. My best friend. Natalie. Natalie Turner. She was part of it. From the very beginning. The name hit Whitman like a freight train. Natalie Turner. She'd read that name dozens of times in the case files. Natalie had been Emily's closest friend growing up. They'd been inseparable, sleepovers every weekend, matching friendship bracelets, dreams of going to the same college. Natalie had been one of the first people police interviewed after Emily disappeared. She'd sobbed through the entire questioning, devastated by the loss of her best friend. Or so everyone thought. What do you mean she was part of it? Whitman asked, her detective instincts kicking into overdrive. Emily's laugh was bitter, empty. She set me up. That night I was supposed to meet Jake at the diner. Natalie knew. She knew because I told her. And she told Craig. She made sure I'd be alone on that route. She even suggested I take the shortcut through the park, the one where there are no cameras, no witnesses. The betrayal in Emily's voice was palpable. This wasn't just about being kidnapped by a stranger. This was about being sold out by someone she loved. Someone she trusted more than anyone. For years, I kept asking myself why, Emily continued, her voice shaking. Why would she do that to me? We were like sisters. And then I found out she was seeing Craig. She was obsessed with him. And when he told her he wanted me instead, she helped him take me. She thought if she helped him, he'd come back to her. But he never did. Whitman felt sick. The layers of manipulation, the twisted psychology, it was even darker than she'd imagined. Where is Natalie now? Whitman asked. I don't know, Emily said, and for the first time, there was something else in her voice. Not fear. Anger. But she's been watching. All these years, she's been keeping tabs on me, making sure I stayed hidden. She'd send messages through Craig, telling me that if I ever tried to leave, if I ever told anyone, she'd make sure my family paid the price. She said she had connections. People who could make my mom disappear just like I did. The investigation into Natalie Turner began immediately. Whitman's team pulled every record they could find. Credit cards. Phone records. Social media. Employment history. They interviewed everyone who had known Natalie growing up, everyone she'd worked with, lived near, dated. What they found was chilling in its ordinariness. After Emily's disappearance, Natalie had seemingly moved on with her life. She'd gone to college, gotten a degree in psychology, the irony wasn't lost on anyone, and worked at various counseling centers across Michigan. She'd married, divorced, remarried. She'd lived a completely normal life on the surface. But the deeper they dug, the more cracks appeared. Natalie had moved 17 times in 23 years. That's almost once every year and a half. Each time, she'd leave suddenly, no forwarding address, minimal explanation to neighbors or co-workers. She'd switch jobs, change her appearance, reinvent herself. Someone running. Or someone watching. They found something else too. Natalie had made regular trips to northern Michigan over the years. The same region where Thompson's compound had been. The same area where Emily had been held captive. She hadn't just been an accomplice. She'd been an active participant, checking in, making sure Emily stayed under control, ensuring the secret stayed buried. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Natalie's first ex-husband. She was obsessed with some girl from high school, he told Whitman during a phone interview. His voice carried the bitterness of a failed marriage. Emily something. She'd talk about her constantly, how they'd been best friends, how Emily had betrayed her by going after some guy Natalie liked. It was weird, you know? This woman had been missing for years, and Natalie talked about her like she was still alive. What did you say? Whitman's pulse quickened. Yeah, she'd talk about Emily in present tense. Like Emily probably thinks she's so special, so Emily doesn't know what she's missing. I thought she was just, I don't know, stuck in the past or something. I didn't think. His voice trailed off as the realization hit him. Oh my God. She knew where Emily was the whole time, didn't she? They tracked Natalie to a small apartment in Traverse City, about 3 hours north of Kalamazoo. When Whitman and her team arrived, they found the apartment empty, but not abandoned. There were signs she'd left in a hurry. Coffee still in the pot. Clothes scattered on the bed. A suitcase half-packed. But what they found in the closet made everyone's blood run cold. A shrine. Photographs of Emily covered an entire wall. Pictures from their childhood, from high school, from the investigation after her disappearance. But there were others too, recent photos. Photos of Emily at the compound. Photos of Emily with the child. Photos that could only have been taken by someone who had access, who had been there. And in the center of it all, a photograph of Emily and Natalie from when they were 15, smiling at a school dance. Someone had drawn a red X through Emily's face. Scrawled across the bottom in Natalie's handwriting, "You took everything from me. So I took everything from you." Okay, I need you to pause for a second because this is absolutely insane. Natalie, Emily's best friend, wasn't just involved. She was the architect of this whole nightmare. And here's what I need to know, are you team justice or team forgiveness? Because here's the thing, Natalie was manipulated too, right? She was in love with a monster, obsessed to the point of destroying her best friend's life. So drop a comment right now. Do you think Natalie deserves prison, or do you think she was as much a victim as Emily? And listen, if you're still watching without subscribing, you're basically team give up, and we don't do that here. We're 1,000 subscribers strong, or we will be if you hit that button. Show me you're invested in this story. Show me you want justice. Subscribe now and pick your team in the comments. The manhunt for Natalie intensified. Her face was plastered across every news station in Michigan. Tips started flooding in. She'd been spotted at a gas station in Wisconsin, at a motel in Indiana, at a rest stop in Illinois. But every time they got close, she vanished. It was like chasing a ghost, someone who knew exactly how to disappear because she'd spent 23 years helping someone else do the same thing. Then, 3 weeks into the search, they got a call that changed everything. Natalie wanted to turn herself in. But she had conditions. The meeting was set for a small cafe in Battle Creek, Michigan, neutral territory, public enough to feel safe but quiet enough for privacy. Whitman arrived 30 minutes early, her team positioned at various points around the cafe. Undercover officers posed as customers. Snipers on rooftops. Every exit covered. They weren't taking any chances. At exactly 2 p.m., Natalie Turner walked through the door. She looked nothing like her photos. Her hair, once blonde, was now dark brown and cut short. She'd lost weight, her cheekbones sharp, her eyes sunken and haunted. She wore oversized sunglasses despite being indoors, and her hands shook as she clutched a worn leather purse. She spotted Whitman immediately and walked over, sliding into the booth across from her. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Finally, Natalie removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes red-rimmed from crying. "I want to tell you everything," she said, her voice hoarse. "But first, I need you to understand something. I loved her. Emily. I really did love her." Whitman's jaw tightened. "You have a strange way of showing love." "I know," Natalie whispered. "God, I know. But you have to understand, I was 17. I was stupid and jealous and so in love with Craig that I couldn't see straight. He was older, dangerous, exciting. Everything felt so intense back then, you know? Like every emotion was life or death. So you chose to destroy your best friend's life." Natalie flinched. "I didn't think it would be forever. Craig told me he just wanted to scare her. To teach her a lesson for flirting with him at a party. He said we'd keep her for a few days, shake her up a bit, then let her go. I didn't know, I swear to God, I didn't know he was planning to keep her." "But you found out," Whitman pressed. "And you didn't tell anyone. For 23 years. Natalie's face crumpled. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. "By the time I realized what he'd really done, I was already complicit. He said if I told anyone, he'd kill Emily and make sure the police knew I was involved. He had evidence, texts I'd sent him, photos of me helping him prepare the compound. I was trapped too." "You weren't trapped," Whitman said coldly. "You were protected. You got to live your life, go to college, get married, walk around free while Emily was locked in a cage." "I know." Natalie's voice rose, drawing glances from other customers. She lowered it to a harsh whisper. "I know, okay? Every single day for 23 years, I've lived with this guilt. Do you know what that does to a person? I can't sleep. I can't eat. I can't look at myself in the mirror. I've tried to kill myself 4 times. 4 times. Because I can't live with what I did." Whitman leaned forward, her voice steel. "Then tell me everything. Every detail. Every person involved. Every location. Give me something that makes this worth it. And Natalie did. For the next 6 hours, she laid it all out. How Craig Thompson wasn't working alone. How he was part of a larger network, an organized operation that had been trafficking women and children across the Midwest for decades. She gave them names, locations, bank account numbers, passwords, phone records. She told them about the compound in northern Michigan where Emily had been held, but also about 4 other locations across 3 states. Safe houses where victims were kept before being moved, sold, or worse. She described the structure of the organization. Thompson was mid-level, a recruiter and enforcer. Above him was a man named Marcus Webb, who coordinated logistics. And above Webb was someone Natalie had only heard whispers about, someone with serious power and connections. Someone who could make investigations disappear and evidence vanish. Who? Whitman demanded. Who's at the top? Natalie's hands trembled as she pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse. On it was a single name, written in shaky handwriting, Thomas Caldwell. Whitman felt the air leave her lungs. Thomas Caldwell was a Michigan state senator. A rising political star. He'd been on the news just last week, talking about tougher penalties for human trafficking, ironically enough. He had law enforcement connections, business ties, political influence that reached into every corner of the state. If Natalie was telling the truth, they weren't just dealing with a trafficking ring. They were dealing with a network that extended into the highest levels of Michigan government. How do you know this? Whitman asked, her mind racing. Because I met him, Natalie said quietly. Craig took me to a meeting once, years ago. Caldwell was there. He looked right at me and said, "Make sure the Carter girl stays quiet, or your whole family disappears." He smiled when he said it. Like it was nothing. Whitman's hands clenched into fists. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Because I was terrified. Natalie's voice broke. You don't understand who these people are. They have cops on their payroll. Judges. Politicians. If I'd said anything, I'd be dead within a week. My family would be dead. Emily would be dead. So I stayed quiet and hated myself every single day for it. And the child? Whitman asked. The boy Emily was within the photos. Who is he? Natalie's face went pale. That's part of why I finally came forward. His name is Daniel. He's 6 years old. And he's Emily's son. The words hung in the air like a bomb. Thompson raped her, Natalie continued, her voice barely audible. Multiple times over the years. When she got pregnant, they couldn't risk taking her to a hospital, so I helped deliver the baby. I'm the reason that little boy is alive. And I'm also the reason he's been living in hell his whole life. Whitman felt sick. The scope of the horror, the layers of trauma, it was almost too much to process. Where are they now? She asked. I don't know, Natalie admitted. Emily ran when she found out you were getting close. She's terrified of what Thompson and Caldwell will do if they find out she's been located. She thinks they'll kill her and take Daniel. Then we need to find her before they do. Armed with Natalie's testimony, Whitman's team moved fast. They brought in federal agents. This was too big for local law enforcement now. The FBI, Homeland Security, specialized trafficking task forces. They assembled a war room at the Detroit field office, with Emily's case at the center of a much larger investigation. The locations Natalie provided checked out. FBI teams raided the safe houses simultaneously across Michigan, Wisconsin, and Illinois. What they found was devastating. 11 women and children were recovered from various locations, all in different stages of captivity. Some had been missing for months, others for years. One woman had been gone for 15 years, presumed dead. The media explosion was immediate. News trucks camped outside police headquarters. Headlines screamed across every outlet, "Massive trafficking ring exposed in Michigan and Senator Caldwell linked to kidnapping operation." Caldwell, for his part, denied everything. Held a press conference with his lawyers, called it a politically motivated witch hunt, claimed he was being framed. But the evidence was mounting. Financial records showed payments from Caldwell's shell companies to Marcus Webb. Phone records placed him at locations where victims had been held. And most damning of all, they found video footage from one of the safe houses, security camera footage that showed Caldwell visiting, inspecting the merchandise, as one recovered victim described it. The man who had built his political career on family values and law and order was actually running one of the most sophisticated trafficking operations in the Midwest. But there was still one critical piece missing: Emily and Daniel. They'd gone completely off the grid. No credit card use. No phone pings. No security camera sightings. It was like they'd vanished into thin air again. Whitman couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. If Thompson or Caldwell's associates found Emily before law enforcement did, this whole case could collapse. Emily was the key witness. She'd lived it for 23 years. Her testimony could put these monsters away forever. But only if they found her alive. The break came from an unexpected source: Susan Carter, Emily's mother. "She came to see me," Susan told Whitman over the phone, her voice shaking with emotion. "Last night. Emily. She was standing on my doorstep with a little boy, and I almost didn't recognize her. But her eyes? I'd know those eyes anywhere." Whitman's heart leaped. "Where is she now?" "She wouldn't stay," Susan said, crying. "She said it wasn't safe. But she gave me something. A burner phone. Said she'd call when she was ready." "Did she say anything else? Anything about where she's been hiding?" "She said." Susan's voice broke. "She said she forgives me for not finding her sooner. Can you imagine? After everything she's been through, she's worried about my feelings." Whitman felt a lump form in her throat. "If she calls again, we need to know immediately. Her testimony is crucial to taking these people down." "I know," Susan whispered. "I'll call you the second I hear from her." 2 days later, the call came. Emily was ready to testify. But she had one condition: witness protection for her and Daniel. Complete new identities. Relocation far from Michigan. A chance to finally start over without looking over her shoulder. "Done," Whitman said without hesitation. "Whatever you need." They arranged a meeting at a secure FBI facility. Whitman was there when Emily walked in, Daniel clutching her hand. Seeing them together broke something in Whitman's chest. This little boy, who'd known nothing but captivity. This woman, who'd lost her entire youth to a monster's twisted obsession. But Emily stood tall. Scared, yes. Traumatized, absolutely. But also determined. "I want to make sure they never do this to anyone else," Emily said quietly. "I want to make them pay for every single day they stole from me." "Then let's make them pay," Whitman replied. The trial of Thomas Caldwell began 6 months later and immediately became a media circus. Reporters from every major outlet descended on the courthouse. Protesters gathered outside, some supporting Caldwell, convinced he was being framed, others demanding justice for the victims. Security was intense, with metal detectors, bag searches, and armed officers stationed at every entrance. Inside, the prosecution had built an airtight case. Financial records, video evidence, testimony from 11 recovered victims, phone records placing Caldwell at multiple crime scenes. But the centerpiece of their case was Emily Carter. The day she took the stand, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. People stood in the aisles, pressed against the walls, desperate to hear from the woman who'd become the face of this horrific operation. Emily looked small in the witness chair, but her voice was steady as she was sworn in. "Ms. Carter," the prosecutor began gently, "can you tell the court what happened on the night of June 15, 2000? And Emily did. She told them everything. She described leaving her house that evening, excited to meet her boyfriend at the diner. She described taking the shortcut through the park that Natalie had suggested. She described the van that had pulled up beside her, how Craig Thompson had grabbed her before she could scream, how she'd fought until something sharp pricked her arm and everything went black. She described waking up in the compound, locked in a windowless room, terrified and alone. She described the years that followed. The manipulation, the isolation, the abuse. Being told that her family had stopped looking for her, that they'd moved on, that she'd been forgotten. She described being moved between locations, always watched, never free. The other women she'd met briefly before they disappeared to who knows where. And she described meeting Thomas Caldwell. He came to inspect the compound, Emily testified, her voice trembling but clear. Craig called him the boss. He walked past all of us like we were furniture. And when he got to me, he stopped and said, "This one's pretty. We could get good money for her overseas." Like I was a thing. Not a person. Just merchandise. The courtroom was silent. Several jurors were crying. Caldwell sat at the defense table, his face an impassive mask. But Whitman, watching from the gallery, could see the slight tremor in his hands. He was finally feeling the walls close in. "I need to stop right here because some of you, and I can see you in the comments, some of you are still questioning whether Emily's telling the truth. Whether this really happened. Whether Caldwell is really guilty. And you know what? That's exactly what powerful people count on. They count on doubt. On skepticism. On people thinking this seems too crazy to be real. So here's what I need you to do if you believe Emily, if you're Team Survivors, smash that like button right now. But if you're sitting there thinking I need more evidence, leave it gray. Let's see where this audience really stands. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you're literally choosing the side of silence, the side that lets these monsters win. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers, and we're so close. Every subscription is a vote for truth, for justice, for making sure stories like Emily's get told. Don't be a bystander. Hit subscribe, tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and let's finish this story together. The defense tried to discredit Emily. They suggested she was confused, that years of trauma had distorted her memories, that she couldn't definitively prove Caldwell's involvement. But then the prosecution played the security footage. Crystal clear video of Thomas Caldwell entering one of the safe houses, walking through rooms where women were being held, stopping to speak with Marcus Webb, handing over a briefcase that was later discovered to contain $50,000 in cash. The defense had no answer for that. Natalie Turner testified next, and her appearance shocked the courtroom. She looked like she'd aged 20 years. Gaunt, hollow-eyed, barely able to meet anyone's gaze. She described her role in Emily's abduction with brutal honesty, accepting full responsibility for her actions. She described the network structure, Caldwell's position at the top, the systematic operation that had destroyed so many lives. "I will never forgive myself," Natalie said at the end of her testimony, tears streaming down her face. "What I did to Emily, to those other women, to their families, there's no redemption for that. I don't expect mercy. I don't deserve it. I just hope that my testimony helps make sure these men never hurt anyone else." The prosecution rested its case after 3 weeks of testimony. The defense presented their case in less than a week, character witnesses for Caldwell, experts questioning the validity of the evidence, a narrative of a successful politician being taken down by false accusations. It rang hollow. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they returned to the courtroom, the tension was electric. Whitman sat next to Susan Carter, both women holding their breath. In the case of the People versus Thomas Caldwell, on the charge of conspiracy to commit human trafficking, how do you find? Guilty. The word echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap. On the charge of kidnapping. Guilty. On the charge of racketeering. Guilty. Guilty on all 27 counts. The courtroom erupted. Victims and families sobbed with relief. Reporters rushed to file their stories. Caldwell's face went ashen as reality sank in. He was going to prison for the rest of his life. Emily sat in the front row, Daniel beside her, tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of pain. These were tears of release. Of justice. Of finally being believed. Whitman watched as Susan rushed to her daughter, embracing her for the first time in 23 years. Mother and daughter, reunited by hope and determination and the refusal to give up. 6 months after the trial, Whitman drove to a small town in Oregon. Emily and Daniel had been relocated through witness protection, given new identities and a fresh start far from Michigan. But Emily had reached out, asking if Whitman could visit. The house was modest but warm, with a small yard where Daniel was playing with a dog, his first pet, Emily had mentioned on the phone. Emily greeted Whitman at the door with a genuine smile, the first real smile Whitman had ever seen on her face. "Thank you for coming," Emily said, pulling her into a hug. They sat on the porch, watching Daniel play, drinking iced tea in the late afternoon sun. "How are you doing?" Whitman asked. "Really doing?" Emily was quiet for a moment. "Some days are harder than others," she admitted. "I have nightmares. Daniel asks questions I don't know how to answer. I'm in therapy twice a week, trying to process 23 years of trauma. But I'm free," Emily said, and her voice cracked with emotion. "I can walk outside whenever I want. I can make my own decisions. I can raise my son in the sunshine instead of in the shadows. I'm learning who I am without fear. And it's everything." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. "What happened to Natalie?" Emily finally asked. 20 years, Whitman replied. "She pled guilty to conspiracy and accessory to kidnapping. With cooperation credit, she might get out in 12. Emily nodded slowly. "I wrote her a letter, you know. Haven't sent it yet. I don't know if I ever will." "Do you hate her?" "I did," Emily said honestly. "For years, I hated her more than I hated Craig or Caldwell or any of them. Because she was supposed to love me. She was supposed to be my friend." She paused. But holding on to that hate, it was like drinking poison and expecting her to die. "So I'm trying to let it go. Not for her. For me." Whitman felt a wave of admiration for this woman who'd survived the unsurvivable. "And Thompson?" Emily asked. Found dead in his cell 3 months ago, Whitman said. Official ruling was suicide, but she left the implication hanging. Emily's expression was unreadable. I should feel something about that, she said quietly. But I don't. I just feel empty where he used to be. As the sun began to set, painting the Oregon sky in shades of pink and orange, Daniel ran up to the porch. "Mom, can Detective Whitman stay for dinner?" he asked, his face bright and hopeful. Emily looked at Whitman with a question in her eyes. "I'd love to," Whitman said, smiling at the little boy who'd never known anything but captivity until a few months ago, and who was now discovering what childhood could actually be. Over dinner, spaghetti that Daniel proudly announced he'd help make, Whitman watched this small family finding their rhythm. Learning to laugh. Learning to live. "You know what I realized?" Emily said as they cleaned up. "For 23 years, I survived. I endured. I did what I had to do to stay alive. But now? Now I get to actually live. And I'm going to make every single day count." Later, as Whitman prepared to leave, Emily walked her to the car. "I need you to know something," Emily said. "You saved my life. Not just by finding me, but by believing me. By fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. I'll never be able to repay that." "You don't have to," Whitman replied. "Seeing you here, building a life for yourself and Daniel? That's all the payment I need." They hugged one more time, and Whitman got in her car. As she drove away, she looked in the rearview mirror. Emily stood in the driveway, Daniel beside her, both waving goodbye. Backlit by the porch light, they looked like any normal mother and son. And maybe, Whitman thought, that's exactly what they'd become. Emily Carter's case taught me something I already knew but needed to be reminded of: never give up. Susan Carter didn't give up for 23 years. She held on to hope when everyone else had moved on, when the case went cold, when people told her to accept reality. Emily didn't give up during 2 decades of captivity. She survived. She protected her son. She waited for her moment. And because neither of them gave up, 11 other victims were rescued. A trafficking network that had operated for decades was dismantled. Monsters who thought they were untouchable are now in prison for life. The lesson here isn't just about missing persons cases or human trafficking. It's about persistence. About refusing to let evil win through silence and apathy. About the power of hope, even in the darkest circumstances. Emily lost 23 years of her life. Years she'll never get back. Experiences she'll never have. But she didn't let those stolen years define her future. She's in school now, working toward her GED. She's teaching Daniel to ride a bike. She's learning to trust again, to love again, to believe in a future that isn't defined by her past. If you're watching this and you're going through something dark, something that feels impossible to overcome, Emily's message to you is simple: survive. Endure. Hold on. Because you never know when your moment of rescue might come. And if you're watching this as someone who has the power to help others, whether that's law enforcement, a therapist, a friend, or just a stranger who notices something wrong, speak up. Act. Because silence protects predators, and action saves lives. This case is closed, but there are thousands more like it still waiting to be solved. Families still searching. Victims still waiting to be found. The team working on Emily's case never gave up, and neither should we. If you made it this far, if Emily's story moved you, here's what I need you to do: like this video if you believe in never giving up on the missing. Share it with someone who needs to hear this story, who needs to know that even after decades, there can still be hope. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what Emily's story taught you. And subscribe, because we're building a community here of people who believe in justice, who believe in truth, and who refuse to let the forgotten stay forgotten. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you is part of something bigger than just a YouTube channel. You're part of a movement that says, "We see you. We hear you. We won't forget you." Emily Carter spent 23 years invisible. Let's make sure her story is seen by everyone. Justice was served. Hope was restored. And Emily Carter finally came home.